Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was making tea, and then I was like, "Oh shoot, I need to get over here and start the stream." Um, so we are finishing Volume 2 of Remnants of Filth today. I am super excited. I don't know if the stream is gonna go a tiny bit over. We might not even have to do that, but either way, I'm finishing this book today. um, and then I'm going to get right into book 3 next week. And I just got my copy of book 4, and I was trying very hard not to look at the cover or anything. I'm like, I only briefly saw it. I just put it on my shelf and just tried to ignore it as much as I could. Hi, War Dove. Hi, Henry. Okay. I've got my book, and I've got my tea, and I am gonna get started. And we're on page 311 for chapter 62, which is called Princess Mengzi. I saw this chapter title before, and I've been waiting for this chapter because I want to know about her. Oh, hi, Blue. Yeah, I'm so excited for the next book that, and I couldn't help but see that cover, and it looks crazy. Okay, chapter 62. After that day, Gumong came to understand something about Moshi. He constantly exuded an aura of strength and indifference, a sense that he'd remain unruffled in any calamity. But the more Gumong interacted with him, as his memories began to recover, the more he realized that this wasn't the case. Moshi was always repressing a horde of emotions. They were all under his control, but they couldn't be dispelled. As a result, Moshi was always extremely irascible. When he stood alone beneath the colonnade, staring vacantly into the snow, his expression was terrifyingly complicated. And the tone of his voice changed constantly when he spoke to Gumong, contradicting himself in its conflict. He was like an incurable lunatic on the verge of being tormented to death by his own thoughts, yet he still insisted on donning a mask of ice. Gumong had the feeling that the face behind the mask was in truth quite fragile. Because of that, he never held a grudge against Moshi for striking him and disparaging him earlier. There seemed to be an unshakable habit etched in Gumong's bones that allowed him to effortlessly catch the subtle pain in Moshi's expression, and this made him instinctively want to protect Moshi. How strange. Moshi was clearly a man so powerful that to even imagine him defeated was difficult. He was taller than Gumong, stronger than Gumong, more venerated and more intelligent than Gumong. How ridiculously arrogant, how audacious was it for him to want to protect Moshi? These complicated thoughts made Gumong feel a lot worse after he'd recovered these scant bits of memory. He often sat on the neat pile of firewood and stared blankly at his own hands. Each day and night he would go over the scraps of memory he had regained, recalling what Moshi had said to him over and over again. Moshi had warned him not to tell anyone about the coming-of-age night, so he didn't. He wanted to sort out his past on his own, but the memories he had were truly insufficient. He couldn't link them all together. In the end, all he could do was clutch his head and sit in the courtyard for hours, tangled in confusion. He tried asking Li Wei about Lu Jianxing, about who he himself used to be, and what exactly he and Moshi used to be, but Li Wei wouldn't breathe a word of the past. All he said was, "There are certain things you shouldn't ask about. Sometimes knowing too much won't do you any good. Look, wasn't it better back when you were clueless and silly?" Gumong remained confused, mired in these blurry mirages, until New Year's Eve day arrived. On this day, Shiha Manor was decorated with lanterns and banners. The servants rushed about, changing the peachwood talismans and hanging lanterns. There's a footnote on peachwood talismans. Plaques made of peachwood and carved with the images of gods, which were hung over doors to ward off evil spirits. Spirals of steam puffed out of the kitchen from morning till night. Gumong also busied himself helping. He minced the meat for filling and wrapped dumplings, and scooped fried spring rolls out of the pot. He spent the day bustling about, busy as a bee. We already have meat bun food. Hi, Rena. Surrounded as he was by lively domesticity, Gumong was able to cast aside his preoccupation with his memories and act with his original childlike innocence again. He crouched by the fire pit, stuffing it with straw and other kindling, then waved his little fan to blow air in. When he saw the straw catch fire within the furnace, his eyes lit. He wanted to see it again, so he stuffed a good deal more firewood into the chamber. But there was no actual need for it. One of the cooks turned and immediately paled in terror. 790, she shouted. What are you doing? 790 was the serial number hanging off Gumong's slave collar. Shiha Manor's servants couldn't get used to calling the former General Gu by name, so they all called him 790. Gumong looked up from beside the furnace. Face streaked with soot, he sneezed like a tabby cat. His over-enthusiastic additions of firewood had more or less reduced the cook's spring rolls to ashes. The burly woman yanked him away and hauled him over to Li Wei. Housekeeper Li, can't you find somewhere else for him? If he stays behind the stove, we'll all have a big plate of coal for the New Year's Eve dinner tonight. Seeing this woman snarl at him like an enraged tiger, Housekeeper Li lost his courage. After consoling her for some time, he led the sooty-faced Gumong to the rear courtyard and put a broom in his hands. Why don't you just sweep up here? Sweeping the floor should have been the simplest of tasks, but Gumong didn't do this right either. It was custom for every household in Changhua to scatter some dried goods like peanuts and longans on the ground on New Year's Eve as a good omen for prosperity and fortune. So busy was Li Wei that he forgot to warn Gumong of this, and thus, when he came back to check, Gumong had swept up all of these good omens they had scattered across the floor. I mean, how are you supposed to sweep around that? It would have been one thing if he'd only swept them up, but he'd also tossed them out. Li Wei's face turned green. This is a bad omen, he thought. Afraid that Gumong would beget more misfortune in his ignorance, Li Wei stuffed a copy of the 3-character classic into his hands. And that is a classic text from the Song Dynasty, written entirely in 3-character stanzas, that was used as introductory reading material for children. He had specifically gone to the market to buy this book when he had been teaching Gumong to read. He pulled Gumong into the study and instructed him to sit obediently by the desk. Please, good sir, don't take this as a plea. Don't go anywhere. Don't do anything. Just stay here and read until dinner time. But Gumong understood the concept of fairness very well. I need to do work. Li Wei was at his wit's end. He handed Gumong a sheaf of paper and said, "How about copying verses? That counts as doing work. Once you copy out 100 pages, come eat." Gumong nodded. Okay. Having settled this wandering mischief monster, Li Wei heaved a sigh of relief. He left to continue working, muttering to himself. The feast tonight would be glorious, and every bit of it was for the enjoyment of the servants. Shiha Jun would be attending the New Year's feast at the Imperial Palace, not the manor. The cat was away, so the mice could play. Of course Li Wei was in high spirits. As he hummed in delight, he turned the corner and bumped into a figure in long black robes. Li Wei looked like a duck that had been snatched by the neck. With a quack, he swallowed the tune he was humming and hastily plastered a warm smile over his face. Yeah, that's a lot of pages of copying characters. Like, maybe he has to write them really large because he's learning, but still. My lord, you're preparing to leave? It's about time. I should be going to the palace. Moshi didn't pause in his step. He continued straightening the creases of his sleeves as he walked. Prepare the carriage. Oh, of course, Li Wei responded. As he made to leave, Moshi stopped him. Wait. What further instruction does my lord have? Summon Gumong. I'll bring him with me. Li Wei was at first shocked to hear this, then overcome with unexpected glee. Shock because he hadn't expected Moshi to take Gumong along, though it was customary for each noble family to bring a few personal guests. Glee because Gumong had a voracious appetite, and they would have had to fight him for every morsel if he stayed at the manor. If he were gone, it would save them from having to feed a great big mouth. These were his own selfish thoughts, but housekeeper Li was never derelict in his duty as Moshi's head housekeeper. My lord, it's a new year, he said, demonstrating his loyalty to his post. If you bring a traitor, won't the other families be displeased? Moshi wore a stormy expression. Yesterday, His Imperial Majesty mentioned him by name and said to bring him so that he could see the results of his training. You think I'd do it otherwise? Ah, so that's how it is. Moshi frowned. Where is he? Have him clean himself up and meet me in the main hall to accompany me to the palace. At once, Li Wei responded. Thus, before Gumong had copied more than a few lines of his book, Li Wei dragged him out to brush his hair and change his clothes, then stuffed him into Shiha Jun's carriage, all of which he performed with smooth and agile alacrity. Alacrity. I feel like that's a word that I've read, and I somehow understood from context, but I don't actually know what that means. Yes, both the Lord and the Glutton are gone. Brilliant fireworks were going off in Li Wei's heart, but his expression was still immaculately deferential as he solemnly saw the disappearing carriage off. Safe travels, my lord. A perfect success. Now everyone can let loose and eat their fill at the New Year's feast. Brisk and cheerful readiness. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Blue. Yeah. Chonghua's New Year's Eve feast wasn't overly formal. The food was arranged on the tiered tables in advance, and the nobles could arrive as early or late as they wished. Moshi made his entrance before the main crowd arrived in the palace hall. The officials had already transformed the throne room into a grandiose sight. No less than 1,000 longevity and fortune lanterns lit the night, and a thick red carpet embroidered with tree peonies covered the ground. Butterflies and birds, made from spiritual energy, danced in the air, motes of light scattering with each beat of their wings. Moshi had entered without fanfare, but with his broad shoulders, slender waist, and long legs, and the traitor Gumong conspicuously at his side, he inevitably drew a great deal of notice. The nobles within the hall came forward to greet him one after another. Shiha Jun, you come early today. Shiha Jun, Happy New Year. Although these pleasantries were directed at Moshi, their speaker's eyes glanced in Gumong's direction. Some of those gazes were curious, while others were filled with loathing or disdain. Beneath their stares, Gumong felt rather ill at ease. Moshi greeted the newcomers one by one. Yue Chunqing was at the banquet as well. After glancing back to see Moshi, he bounded over. The young man looked particularly good today. His hair was bound up in a golden crown, and his snowy white Yue clan robes were neat and crisply pressed, setting off his dashing and youthful appearance. "General Mo, you're here. Happy New Year, Happy New Year." When Moshi saw Yue Chunqing in such high spirits, he knew at once that the boy's fourth uncle was around. Otherwise, this lazy lout wouldn't be twirling around so gaily. As expected, he caught a glimpse of Murong Chuyi behind Yue Chunqing, arrayed in silver-trimmed white robes. His ribbons gleamed silver as he stood by the tiered tables and poured osmanthus wine from a jar. Sensing Moshi's eyes upon him, Murong Chuyi turned his head slightly and nodded in greeting, then returned to pouring his wine. The ignorant immortal's reputation for coolness and disregard for social convention was well deserved indeed. As Moshi contemplated this, Yue Chunqing interrupted his thoughts. "Oh right, Mengzi Jiejie is here too." The name Mengzi felt like a soft thorn poking into Moshi's heart. He stared at Yue Chunqing. After a moment, he asked, "She's back?" "Yep, she got back a couple days ago," Yue Chunqing blinked, rather baffled. "Eh? She didn't tell you?" Moshi said nothing. That soft thorn stabbed deeper. Princess Mengzi always instilled in Moshi a peculiar feeling. He couldn't quite put it into words. It was perhaps guilt mixed with gratitude, so potent it had turned into a type of friendship more patiently abiding than love. Once there had been two people... Okay, the hat is missing, but once there had been two people in this world for whom Moshi would offer up his life if they said the word. One was his Gu Shixiang, the other was Murong Mengzi. Gu Shixiang was the man he loved, but in the end, he'd proved unworthy of that love. Murong Mengzi loved him deeply, but the one unworthy of her love was Moshi. Since Moshi had lost his Gu Shixiang forever, Princess Mengzi was his only remaining weakness. Mengzi had fallen for him a long time ago, but Moshi had been a silly youth back then and hadn't understood her affections. He had rejected her directly and stiffly, without the slightest tact or gentleness. Fortunately, Mengzi was a learned and well-mannered woman. Stubborn to her core, she never uttered a word of complaint over her hurt feelings, nor did she further entangle herself. She retreated into a corner where she wouldn't get in his way and continued to quietly care for him as before. Moshi had a cold personality, but his heart wasn't truly made of iron. He had taken notice of the years of affection she'd shown him. When she was still healthy, she'd insisted on joining him on the battlefields despite her status as a member of the imperial family. She'd refused to admit it was because she couldn't bear to be parted from him. She only said that she wanted to gain experience, and that women were more than a match for men. She'd treated his wounds and applied his medicine. In the lantern's hazy light, she would speak gently to him, but Moshi only ever offered her an expression of cool reserve. She'd seen this and understood, so she stopped. Murong Mengzi bore everything so silently, with so much self-restraint, that she even gave Moshi the illusion that she no longer liked him. As if her affection had been so shallow that his rejection had dispersed it entirely. But then, when Gumong had gravely wounded him, when Gumong had left a bloody hole in his heart, and his spiritual core was about to shatter, it was Murong Mengzi who had led the healers that rushed to his rescue. He had thought this girl's feelings for him were superficial, yet she was the steadfast one who took his hand and led him back from the brink of death. Yep, rip Mengzi, your boy's gay. Oh. He had once believed that the love between him and Gumong was sincere and deep. while Mu Rong Mengzi's affections paled in comparison. But that wasn't true. He had offered everything to Gumang, but it wasn't enough to make him turn back. Mengzi, on the other hand, asked for nothing from him, yet she'd exhausted her spiritual core transferring energy to him, just so he might live. Okay, we're getting the reason why she's sick, I guess. In order to save him, she herself had suffered grave injury. To keep his heart from stopping and his core from breaking, she gave up years of her life. Because of this, her health was permanently compromised, and she could never again cast powerful magic. She had once smiled and said that she wished to fight across the 9 provinces and roam undefeated over the lands as a woman. That vision could now never become reality. There are many beautiful things in the world and many people who can make you happy. You have much to look forward to. Murong Mengzi had once said this to Moshi. After Moshi had regained consciousness and learned that Mengzi had sacrificed her own core to save his, he flew to her sickbed. He was on the verge of a breakdown. He had been betrayed by the one he loved deeply, and was unworthy of devotion from this person who had admired him secretly. He didn't know what he should do. He didn't know why Gumang was so ruthless, why Mengzi's feelings were so true. There beside her sickbed, he asked her why she was so foolish. Curving her bloodless lips, she smiled. Don't risk your life for a momentary impulse again. I'm not asking for you to return my feelings. She reached out to tap Moshi on the chest. I only ask that you consider how I'd feel the next time you're seized by a dangerous impulse. That would be enough. She was true to her word. After that day, she never once mentioned the fact that she had sacrificed her core for Moshi. You don't need to be with me out of guilt or gratitude, she had said. I know you still don't love me. I can see it in your eyes. Nor did her behavior change after she recovered. Just as before, she concealed herself in discreet places and used her own methods to quietly care for him and keep him company. Even if all of Changhua felt that the right thing for Moshi to do would be to marry her, Mengzi was very clear on the matter. She would never impose upon his already conflicted heart. But the more she endured, the deeper his remorse grew. Although he could not fall in love with her, and she never became his wife, after all these long years of sacrifice, she had become the only maiden in the world whom Shihajun treasured and felt any tenderness toward. All in all, she was still special. Yue Chunqing saw the distraught look on his face and asked, Shihajun, what's wrong? After a beat, Moshi returned to his senses. Nothing. Where is she? She went to Feiyao Terrace. She said the decorative lanterns there were pretty, so she's viewing the lights. Moshi frowned. It's so cold and she's in poor health. How could she... He paused and then said resolutely, I'll go check on her. He wasted no more time in the palace hall and headed straight for Feiyao Terrace. That's the end of the chapter. Nothing better happened to her. Okay, meat bun? Okay. Well, we're at chapter 63, which is called Heart's Pain. Oh, Henry, you're so right. The gossip crowd is gonna heteroify that one. Yeah. Feiyao Terrace was festooned with lanterns hung high and low in picturesque disorder. Woven from bamboo and covered in paper paste, they resembled a river of stars glittering against the night sky. Snow drifted down through the halo of light, dusting the engraved red lacquer railings with a layer of white. 2 women stood in the snow amid the glow of the lanterns. One of them, attired in a red dress and short coat embroidered with butterflies, spoke with a sweet smile on her face. The other was dressed in goose-yellow robes embellished with bamboo and plum blossoms. She stood by the railing, face tilted up as she gazed at a graceful fish-shaped lantern. In spite of his patchy memories, Gumong knew almost immediately that the second woman must be Murong Mengzi. Moments ago in the palace hall, he'd noticed something strange in Moshi's expression. In all the time he had known Moshi, Gumong had never seen him show so much concern toward someone. He'd thought this Princess Mengzi must be very beautiful indeed. Now, as he saw her through the kaleidoscopic snow, he realized that beautiful was too shallow a descriptor. Murong Mengzi did not boast extraordinary proportions, but she was slender, tall, and elegant, possessing an aristocratic air. In the light of the lanterns, her fair, delicate face shone like fine jade, and the nape of her slender neck arched from her collar like a flower's stem, making her appearance even lovelier. Mengzi. Murong Mengzi turned and stared briefly before breaking into a smile. Ah, Mo Daga. Long time no see. The girl in red was her handmaiden, Yuanyang. The young lady made her own obeisance to Moshi and smiled. This one greets Shihajun. 10,000 blessings to Shihajun. Moshi walked over to Mengzi. Why are you standing out here? Isn't it cold? I've just spent time recovering at the hot spring palace. These lanterns are so pretty, and they're only here once a year, Mengzi said, still smiling. It's fine. Moshi couldn't think how to persuade her otherwise. At that moment, however, his thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a hand reaching out from behind him to touch Mengzi's temple. You should go back inside. It's very cold out here. Because Mengzi was dizzyingly highborn, it was rare for anyone to invade her personal space like this. She took a step back almost instinctively, but once she got a good look at the person beside Moshi, her expression changed. General Gu. Gumong had once been the most popular man among the maidens in Chonghua. Within him remained a tenderness toward the fairer sex. Though faint, some annoyance had surfaced when he saw Moshi treat this woman with such familiarity. He still said kindly, "The snow is so heavy, and your ears are red from the cold." Murong Mengzi was struck speechless. She had heard reports of Gumong's condition even before she returned, but such close and sudden contact with this traitorous devil was nevertheless difficult for her to stomach. Yuanyang's temper, however, was more explosive. Unable to bear the sight of such insult, she upbraided Gumong. "You traitorous bastard! How dare you touch my lady with those filthy paws? If it weren't for you—" "All right," Murong Mengzi softly cut her off. "That's enough." Yuanyang pouted. "Princess, why are you so even-tempered? Even I feel wronged on your behalf." "What nonsense!" Murong Mengzi didn't raise her voice, but her air was imposing. "Yuanyang, stop making such a fuss. You should go back inside and warm up." "Yes, at once." Despite her reluctant acquiescence, Yuanyang shot a furious parting glare at Gumong, her cheeks puffed in anger. With her handmaiden sent away, Murong Mengzi turned to Moshi. "Does he live at your manor now?" It was clear of whom she spoke. Moshi murmured in assent. Murong Mengzi lowered her lashes and sighed. "I don't want to harp on it either. You've already been wounded. You should remember to be mindful." "I know." Gumong didn't catch much of Mengzi's meaning, but because this woman hadn't let that mean lady continue to scold him, he thought that she was probably a good person. Just then, a plum blossom fluttered down from one of the trees arcing over the terrace and landed in Mengzi's hair. Gumong reached over, wanting to help her get rid of that flower. This time, Moshi caught his hand before he even touched Mengzi. A flower fell on her head, said Gumong. Moshi cut him off, his voice flat. This is Princess Mengzi. Make your obeisance. Never mind, said Mengzi. His mind has been damaged. There's no need for him to go through the motions. Gumong didn't reply, his blue eyes flitting between Mengzi and Moshi. In the end, he slowly lowered his head. I only wanted to help. Moshi decided to bring an end to this conversation. You should go back to the Great Hall. I have something to discuss with her. Now it was Moshi's turn to chase someone off. As it turned out, Gumong and Yuenyang were quite alike. They were both the ones to be sent away. Gumong looked silently at Moshi and Mengzi. After a few seconds, he quietly turned to go. Gumong had always been gentle and accommodating toward women. Even after he lost his memories, this part of his personality hadn't changed. He'd always felt that they were fragile, delicate, and beautiful, deserving of the utmost protection. He, on the other hand, was a coarse and brutish grown man. Women deserved the best he had, and he ought to treat them courteously. Thus he felt that what Moshi did was right. Princess Mengzi was a princess, an extraordinary woman who was even more deserving of reverence and care than usual. He was filthy. He was a slave. Of course he shouldn't be trying to touch her. But for some reason, he felt deeply distraught. He returned to the great hall, rubbing his cold reddened hands and cupping his freezing ears. By this point, the hall had filled with many guests, but he didn't recognize anyone when he looked around. He suddenly felt intensely helpless, like a dog abandoned in the wilderness. He turned instinctively to look for Moshi, his only point of support. But in that moment, he realized Moshi was the one who sent him away. He had nowhere to go. He could only stand blankly next to the terrace entrance, gazing at the two distant figures under the lights. This is like me when I go to a party with, like, one friend, and then I don't know anyone else, and I'm just, like, hanging on to that friend, and then when they have to go away, I'm just standing there like, what do I do? But also, it's a lot sadder than that. Yeah, I kind of feel like Gumong treats and thinks about women the way that he does because they're, like, untouchable beauty. Like, he's not actually attracted to women, and it's just this sort of, like, mythological thing, and he hasn't quite, like, figured that out yet. Beneath the splendid lanterns, Moshi bent his head to speak to Mengzi. Mengzi laughed, sometimes interrupted by a cough. At some point, Moshi seemed to ask her something. Mengzi covered her mouth to cough, and then shook her head. They were too far away for Gumong to hear anything, but Moshi's features were distinct. Even at this distance, Gumong could clearly see the expression he wore. Moshi unmistakably sighed, then unfastened the outer coat of his ceremonial military robes and passed it to Murong Mengzi. He didn't drape it over her shoulders or touch her in any way, but for some reason, the sight made Gumong's heart throb. His brows drew together, and he brought a hand to his chest and pressed. Before he had quite figured out what this feeling was, an assortment of disconnected snatches of dialogue flashed through his mind. Shuxiong, I meant it when I said I liked you. It was Moshi's voice, full of the same youthful sincerity it had held in his dreams. His Imperial Majesty has named me Shihajun. In the future, I'll never have to bow to the whims of others again. I will achieve everything that I promised you. I want to rightfully and properly be together with you. Gumong, I will give you a home. Wait for me, okay? Believe me. Gumong's heart hurt more and more fiercely, as if a thistle had grown roots and sprouted in it, only to be violently torn out. Those old words echoed in his ears. His vision doubled. The sorrow caused such agony he couldn't remain upright. Gripping the balcony's doorframe to keep himself steady, he panted, head hung low. He didn't quite understand the meaning behind those words he'd just remembered, nor could he recall what had happened before and after, or how those oaths had been sworn. But this pain, along with his old feelings, were distinctly carved into his bone marrow. Even breathing was difficult. The air caught in his throat. Oh, we have art. Can I make this? Yep. So that's Moshi and Mengzi just having their little conversation that Gumong is getting super sad about. Somewhere in his subconscious, he felt like he'd expected a pain like this. It was as though his past self had foreseen events like the one he now witnessed. It was as though he had never taken Moshi's oath seriously. The future Moshi had painted for him was so beautiful. The young man in his memories seemed to have pledged that oath with his whole life, his heart, his body, his passion, and all of his love. Gumong could tell that once he had wanted to believe it. So much so that he had ached and shivered and nearly shattered. He had wanted to take Moshi's hand, to throw caution to the wind and heedlessly trust him and love him. But despite all this, in the end, he was too afraid. Moshi was the darling of the heavens, a descendant of Chonghua's nobility, the fourth in a line of generals, and Gumong was nobody. This love was too heavy. He couldn't bear its weight. He knew there would come a day when Moshi would grow up, grow wiser, and come to know that his feelings for Gumong were nothing but an impulse of his youth. A life was a very long time. The one accompanying him through it would never be a lowly and base-born slave. But it seemed that he hadn't confessed any of this to Moshi back then. As he recalled it now, he realized that it was because he'd been afraid of this as well. Voicing these thoughts would have constituted a wretched defeat. He already had so little. He could not afford to hand over the sincerity of his heart. To the gentry, a slave's heart didn't count for much. It could be broken, toyed with, discarded, or even crushed underfoot. But to him, this little heart was all he had, the only thing he had to his name in this life. So Moshi could love and break taboos with him in a moment of rash impulse, but Gumong had no such luxury. Fate had its own hierarchy. Such was life, as loath as he was to admit it. Oof. I think Gumong has remembered enough to like understand this. Like, it's the narrator, but the narrator always has somebody's perspective. So right now, like, it's definitely in his perspective. Yeah, it's coming back to him. Even if he closed his eyes, he couldn't hide from the truth. Fate had dealt him a meager hand. What Moshi wanted, he couldn't give. What Moshi gave, he couldn't bear. The best place for him was where he was now, standing outside the terrace in a dim and unremarkable corner, glancing at love affairs that had nothing to do with him, maybe even laughing a little to himself. But Gumong couldn't laugh. A deep-rooted instinct protected him. He dimly knew he should smile with relief, but in any case, he was no longer the General Gu of old. The smile wouldn't come. He turned his head away, no longer daring to look at the scene on the terrace. As though fleeing those figures, he walked over to the tiered tables and stood beside them, soothing his aching heart. More and more attendees arrived. Standing by himself, a convicted criminal, Gumong was naturally the target of many sidelong glances. Some of these guests had blood debts with Gumang, and their gazes fixed upon him as though they would have rushed to devour him whole if not for the occasion. As Gumang slowly returned to his senses, he realized that something was wrong. He looked around and saw ice-cold faces full of hatred surrounding him in every direction. He hastily grabbed some food from the table at random and, clutching it to his chest, scurried away in panic, like a universally reviled rat. At last he found an unremarkable corner to crouch in. Only then did he notice that none of the things he'd grabbed were tasty. His foraging skills were terrible indeed. From a table full of delicacies, he'd grabbed only 2 green onion and sesame pancakes. It contained that hated vegetable, and it was cold too. At this point, however, he couldn't afford to pick and choose. Gumang lowered his head and began to nibble on a pancake. As he chewed in silence, a warm and low voice sounded from behind him. "Gumang, why are you here?" Gumang turned around with the pancake dangling from his mouth. Jiang Yeshue sat in his wooden wheelchair, looking at him in astonishment. It was the man who had helped him put on the necklace. Gumang let out a sigh of relief. He didn't feel any hatred towards this man, and even felt that they might have been quite close. He bit down on the pancake and mumbled, "I won't annoy anyone if I'm here." Of course, Jiang Yeshue was aware of how others would treat him. He sighed. "Where's Shihajun?" "He's with the princess." "I see. No wonder he left you here alone." Gumang swallowed a bite of pancake. "Why are you here? Do people not like you either?" Jiang Yeshue smiled. "Pretty much." He glanced into the distance. Yue Chunqing was beaming as he chattered to his 4th uncle, radiant with delight. As usual, Murong Chuyi treated him with indifference, perhaps not even listening. Jiang Yeshue watched them for a while and then looked away. Indeed, people don't like me. Gumang scooched over to make some space for Jiang Yeshue. The two watched snowflakes drift outside the window in wordless silence. Suddenly, Gumang glanced at Jiang Yeshue's legs and asked, "Why are you always sitting?" A pause. "I was wounded in battle. I can never stand up again." Gumang didn't reply right away. He took a few more bites of the pancake, but he truly couldn't bear the taste of the green onion anymore. He held it out to Jiang Yeshue. "Want some?" After a moment's silence, Jiang Yeshue sighed. "You're just the same as you were before." Gumang's eyes widened slightly. "You knew me too?" "Who on earth would not know thee?" Jiang Yeshue said with a grin. "Ooh, there's a footnote. From Bidding Farewell to Dong the Great too, by Tang Dynasty poet Gao Shi. Who on earth would not know thee?" Jiang Yeshue said with a grin. "I don't really get it." "I did know you. You, Shihajun, Lu Jianxing, and you, Shihajun, Lu Jianxing, and I used to defend the borders together." As he spoke, Jiang Yeshue glanced at the pancake in Gumang's hands. "Back then, when you couldn't finish something, you'd also try to fob it off on us." Gumang stared at him in confusion. "So, are you also an old friend of mine?" "Yes," Jiang Yeshue replied. "We risked life and limb together." He sighed softly. "So I can't hate you." Gumang looked down. "But Moshi hates me." Jiang Yeshue chuckled, dark eyes gleaming with a peaceful, clear light. "You're not wrong. Although, out of all the men in the world, he's probably the one who least wants to hate you." A pause. "Really?" "Yes." Snowflakes floated onto the window lattice, stained orange by the lights from the palace hall. Jiang Yeshue smoothed the coat draped over his shoulders and admired the snow with Gumang. In the past, he did treat you quite well. Gumong made no sound. Zhang Yeshua's voice was mellow and deep. When you were trapped, he insisted on rescuing you, despite the risk to his own life. When you fell unconscious from your wounds, he stayed up for days on end to watch over you. When you received any honor or award, he was happier for you than for any of his own achievements. When you made jokes, he's such a serious person, but he always sat with the other soldiers and watched you. As soon as you delightedly finished the joke, he always laughed first. But you've forgotten all this. Zhang Yeshui had experienced plenty of pain and suffering, and had faced his own mortality. When he spoke, his words were mild, and it was as though he were calmly chatting about the past with an old friend. Both his tone and expression were light, but those words plunged Gumong into shock. In his mind's eye, he could almost catch some blurry shadows, a few shards from the past. A crowded and bustling little tavern, its atmosphere cheerful, packed with boisterous soldiers. He stood on a chair and grinned as he boasted and chatted with the people below him. Gumong scanned the crowd. He couldn't remember the faces of those merrily yelling beneath him, but as soon as he looked up, he noticed the young man sitting beside the liquor cabinet. His posture was perfect, his gaze gentle. Over the heads of the noisy soldiers, that man had eyes only for him. In an instant, Gumong's heartbeat from that past moment was revived. He remembered the promises he'd heard. His past self hadn't chosen to believe them, but nevertheless, he could tell that Moshi had meant them wholeheartedly. I really do like you. I will give you a home. Wait for me. Gumong closed his eyes and fell silent. If you hadn't abandoned him and hurt him, if you hadn't crossed his lines and violated his deepest taboos, how could he hate you? Asked Zhang Yesue. He was always protecting you. He was willing to shield you against any hardships, but you stabbed him from behind. Gumong flinched. Was it true? Was that how it was? He thought of the way Moshi had looked when he gripped his hand, pressing it against his chest. Moshi had said, "You nearly killed me." People's hearts are made of flesh, Zhang Yesue continued. He protected you for so long and gave all that he could give. He is a noble, one of the most highborn young masters in Chonghua. He comes from generations of heroes, a family with a history of unparalleled glory. Yet for you, back then, there was nothing he wouldn't do. But after that last stab you gave him, he couldn't protect you any longer. No one else had ever said anything like this to Gumong. If someone had explained this to him a few years ago, he wouldn't have believed it at all. But after his recent interactions with Moshi and the memories he'd regained in the last few days, Zhang Yeshui's words left his heart and mind a mess. His blue eyes glimmered. Why are you telling me all this? I was once your comrade, and his as well. Zhang Yeshue paused, his expression complicated. I don't really want to see the two of you hurt each other again. Gumong sat in a daze for a while, searching for an excuse for his past wrongdoings. But he's very mean, he said almost helplessly. He said I was very dirty. That's because you didn't know he loathes traitors more than anything. Gumong stared. Why does he hate traitors the most? Zhang Yeshue paused to consider this. I wasn't planning to get into this with you tonight, but, he sighed, no matter. I've already told you half of it anyway. There's no harm. Let me ask you, do you know how his father, Fu Lingjun, lost his life? Gumong shook his head. It was because of a traitor. Zhang Yeshue turned to look at Gumong as he spoke. Many years ago, Fu Lingjun was fighting the Liao Kingdom's armies. He hadn't expected that his second-in-command would defect and threaten the city next to their encampment. While Fu Lingjun was helping the citizens evacuate, the traitor captured him. Gumong's eyes flew wide open. And then, in order to curry favor with the Liao ruler, that traitor killed Fu Lingjun with his own hands. He cut off his head and stole his spiritual core, then presented them to the enemy nation for a handsome reward. That man was immediately appointed to the rank of general, just as you were. These awful words slipped in through Gumong's ears and stabbed him through the heart. His hands were trembling. Even more ironically, Fu Lingjun had written a letter to his family that he never got the chance to send. In this letter, he praised the traitor's loyalty, saying that with a brother like this, his family needn't worry. Jiang Yeshue looked down at his own knees and sighed. He also wrote, "Who says we have no clothes, for we share the same robes of battle." There is a footnote from a pre-Qin dynasty poem collected in the Book of Songs, describing the morale of the Qin army uniting against a common foe. The word for comrade, Tong Pao, literally means to share the same robe. That's not what's happening here, but because they're talking about the word comrade, it just reminded me that, I think comrade is also slang for gay in China. Fu Lingjun put the lives of his own family into his comrade's hands, but his brother didn't even leave an intact body for his family to mourn. When the casket entered the city, Fu Lingjun's remains were a gory, dismembered mess. Jiang Yeshue turned to look at the pallid Gumong. Moshi was only 7 years old. The lump in his throat left Gumong unable to make a single sound. "Gumong," Jiang Yeshue said, "do you understand why Shihajun hates traitors now?" He paused. "You and the man who killed his father basically did the exact same thing." Gumong stared at him blankly. Coldness seemed to have seeped into the spaces between his bones. "Ask yourself honestly. Think it over." Jiang Yeshue sighed once more. "What kind of saint would he have to be to bear you no grudge?" Okay. Well, that was a chapter. Oh. Oh. Wow, okay. I'm really glad we got that backstory on Moshi, and I'm so glad that finally someone is just, telling Gumong what he did, because he's just been running around super confused, not understanding, and people just sort of allude to him being a traitor, and he's like, well, what? What are you talking about? He doesn't know. So finally, I'm gonna take, 5 to 10 minute break, and when I come back, we're gonna read chapter 64, which is called Moshi Can Hold His Drink. That's a fun one. I have Do Not Disturb on, so, hopefully you shouldn't get any phone notification sounds from me this time. But we'll find out. Alright, I will see y'all in just a jiffy. Hello. I'm back. I'm back and I'm not muted. Also, hi Nina. I'm sorry you had a rough night last night. It's good to see you here. We are on page 335 for chapter 64. Moshi can hold his drink. And no phone sounds. Exactly. Okay. By the time Moshi and Mengzi came in from the cold, the great hall was full of guests. As soon as Princess Yanping glimpsed them together, she bounded over, all smiles. Jie, brother-in-law, she said sweetly, wishing you peace and happiness. Mengzi cleared her throat. Little girls should learn to watch their tongues. Moshi glanced at Princess Yanping. Her attempts at seducing him when he'd first returned to the capital were fresh in his memory, yet she was now trying to pretend nothing had happened. Her skin was really shockingly thick. Yanping batted her lashes at him. Heh, Shihajun thinks of my sister day and night. All you two are missing is a wedding, so what's wrong with me calling you my brother-in-law? Yanping, Mengzi exclaimed. Okay, I won't bother you two any more. Yanping cast one last coquettish glance at Moshi. Beautiful brother-in-law. See you later. She disappeared in a cloud of scented powder, leaving Moshi and Mengzi to look at each other in dismay and abject embarrassment. Moshi glanced at the water clock, then said, His Imperial Majesty will be here soon. I'll help you to your seat. Mengzi smiled. There's no need. I still need to find a few friends and make my greetings. Shihajun may attend to his own affairs. With that, she left. Moshi stood in place and looked around for a moment, but Gumong was nowhere in sight. He frowned. Where did he go? Moshi could summon him with the slave collar, but he still wasn't fond of that object. Instead, he opted to search on foot, crossing the palace with long strides. In the end, he found Jiang Yeshue talking to Gumong in a secluded corner. What are the two of you doing here? Jiang Yeshue turned at the sound of his voice. He replied mildly, We happened to bump into each other. We're just chatting. What do you two have to chat about? Jiang Yeshue smiled and didn't prevaricate. You. Moshi shifted his gaze to Gumong, but Gumong was looking down, fiddling uneasily with his sleeves. Just as Moshi opened his mouth to speak, he was interrupted by the herald's announcement behind them. His Imperial Majesty has arrived. Moshi swallowed the words on the tip of his tongue, and instead said to Gumong, Time to go. Come with me back to our seats. Once the Emperor arrived, the New Year's Eve feast officially began. Naturally, it was a glittering and sumptuous spectacle, with magnificent toasts and speeches full of praise. Dancers performed as the guests dined, and the sound of music filled the room. After the appropriate rites were performed, the banquet grew lively as the families toasted and flattered each other, warm smiles shining on their crowding faces. The Emperor relaxed into the cushions of his throne, a lazy smile on his face. Gentlemen, we ask nothing of you but this. Be merry. The crowd toasted their thanks, wishing good fortune upon the nation and the throne. It was a warm, joyous scene. After the third round, the nobles began to stroll throughout the hall and toast one another. Murong Lian slouched in his seat, smoking his pipe. His peach blossom eyes were downcast, his expression slightly tipsy but mostly weary. When Moshi glanced over at him, he discovered that Murong Lian was staring at Gumong through narrowed eyes, that hazy gaze hiding some indescribable emotion. Here, Shihajun, I'll toast to you. Changfeng Jun had come and brought his heart-mad daughter along. Moshi looked away from Murong Lian and made a toast to Changfeng Jun's longevity. After they exchanged the customary pleasantries, Moshi asked, Has your daughter been feeling better? Chang Feng-jun patted Lanar's head, the corners of his eyes crinkling as he smiled. She has. Medicine Master Jiang has been taking care of her ever since he returned. Truly, where would we be without him? Lan-ar was so small, but her head barely cleared the feast. Lan-ar was so small, her head barely cleared the feast table. Her eyes brightened at the sight of Gumong. "Da-ga-ga," she softly exclaimed in delight. Gumong blinked, his blue eyes curving like spring leaves as he smiled. "Little dragonfly. Hee, my name is Lan-ar. She didn't get to finish. The banquet was a gathering of loose tongues, and chatting with someone so notorious would do her no good. Chang Feng-jun put a hand on his daughter's head, hinting that she should be quiet. "Papa?" Lan-ar asked in confusion. Gumong was no longer as bewildered as he might have been. Now he understood that he was a traitor, and traitors were disgraceful. And that was to say nothing of the things Jiang Yeshue had just divulged to him. In the past, the word traitor had not aroused any deep or visceral feelings in him. All he knew was that everyone's eyes contained an inexpressible hatred when they said this word. But when Moshi said it, that hatred seemed to be accompanied by an abyssal heartbreak. No wonder. He had only been 7. Like a wolf cub that hadn't yet learned to hunt. And because of the traitor whom his father had considered a brother, his father died such a grisly death. So Gumong had done exactly as that man had. No wonder everyone reviled him, treated him with disdain. A wolf that betrayed its pack deserved to be torn apart and eaten alive. "Da-ga-ga, are you upset?" Gumong's expression dulled. He lowered his head, sinking into his thoughts, and fell silent. Lan-ar was still young and naive. She thought he was spurning her because of her heart madness and couldn't stop tears from welling up in her eyes. "Da-ga-ga, we played together before That's enough, Lan-ar." Chang Feng-jun forced a smile and pulled her close. "Shiha-jun, we're off to toast a few other families, wishing you peace and happiness." Then he hurriedly led his daughter away. The girl kept looking back with every step. Moshi felt that something was off. He turned to look at Gumong. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Gumong sniffled. "Happy New Year." "Oh." He did as the rest were doing, picking up a cup of wine from the table. "I'll toast to you, too." Moshi said nothing. Jiang Yeshue, that meddlesome people-pleaser, had definitely told Gumong something he shouldn't. He refused to accept the wine Gumong held out to him. Moshi stared into those blue eyes, as if he wanted to peer past them straight into his flesh and bone. "Just what did you hear?" he asked through clenched teeth. But Gumong hadn't time to say anything before another group of people came by to offer a toast. Moshi couldn't discuss such matters in front of others, so he had no choice but to perform the niceties. Being the highest-ranked general among Chonghua's aristocracy, he had no shortage of people coming up to rub elbows with him. The moment one group left, another took its place. Moshi wanted to grab Gumong and interrogate him, but he gradually realized that this was presently impossible. "Shiha-jun, wishing you peace and happiness. Here, here, a toast for Shiha-jun to achieve even more merits in the coming year." Chonghua's nobles were numerous indeed. As each one came up to toast him, Moshi downed one drink after another, imbibing more than enough to make him tipsy. Unlike the Honorable Wang Shujun, however, Moshi's alcohol tolerance was respectable. Muranglian was already thoroughly inebriated, slumping in his seat as he bit down on his pipe and took another drag of ephemera with hazy eyes. But as the evening wore on, even Moshi was nearing his limits, and still more old nobles came forth to toast him. They were all grizzled seniors, his uncles and elders, so Moshi had no choice but to show deference, repressing his own discomfort to drink with them. The high-ranking Northern Frontier Army officials sitting in the seats of honor watched from afar. One of them couldn't help but whisper, "Are they trying to get stepdad so sloshed he faints?" Someone else snickered, gloating, "Pfft, Back when Shihajun was on campaign, we had to celebrate the new year in the camp. He was the boss, and he refused to drink no matter who toasted him. One year, he even banned alcohol. Now that he's back in the capital, he doesn't get to call the shots anymore, haha. What goes around comes around. I cannot get the next page. There we go. One of the others was positively gleeful over the thought. His eyes sparkled as he asked, "Guys, do you think Stepdad will get drunk tonight? Whoa, now that would be a sight to see. I've never seen Stepdad blackout drunk. Do you think he'll go nuts? I think he'll just fall asleep. Come on, why don't we bet on it? I bet that our Stepdad will fall asleep and stay asleep. I bet that he'll toss fireballs at people. Bet high or bet low, but once you bet, let the money go." This reminds me of something from Arha. These army grunts didn't mean well, and those old nobles plying Moshi with wine didn't do it out of kindness either. They were of noble lineage, just like Moshi, so there were no class conflicts to speak of, but clan grudges and jealousy were no doubt present in spades. All of them wore the same blue-gold ribbon and had the same noble blood. So why was it that Moshi stood head and shoulders above their sons and grandsons? Moshi had lost his father young, and his mother had taken up with her dead husband's brother. Family scandal upon family scandal. The Mo clan should have long faded into irrelevance. Who could have expected Moshi to be tough as nails, enduring every hardship, persisting until he'd reached his current position of absolute dominance? What gave him the right? Adding insult to injury, Moshi was not only accomplished on the battlefield, but was also a paragon of propriety. Putting him next to other pampered and spoiled scions of the same age was like comparing clouds and mud. Forget the old emperor. Even the current emperor had nothing but praise for him. Every young master born to a noble family had, at one point, been hauled out and compared to Shihajun. Even when these elders privately measured their children against each other, they'd always end up mentioning Moshi. Someone would say, "Ah, my son's growing up to be more and more handsome." To that, the other family would sourly respond, "Heh, not as handsome as Shihajun." Or someone would say, "My boy's sure gifted. He blew up the Academy's spiritual energy testing pillar at 13, ha ha ha." To which the other family would snidely comment, "Heh, Shihajun blew them up at age 10. He burned down 10 whole stone pillars. Can your son do that?" Yet another would say, "My son isn't great at much else, but his strength lies in his grace and refinement. Didn't his Imperial Majesty even praise him in court? Ah, as his dad, it sure feels good to hear it." To that, the other family would snark, "Heh, what's that next to Shihajun, the lotus blooming pure?" What a curiosity it was. It wasn't like Shihajun was some immortal, yet he spent all his days acting like he was above earthly matters. Did he truly not have a single speck of filth on him? Had he never made a single mistake? And so Moshi became the greatest grudge in these elders' hearts. Although many of them praised him aloud, in their hearts they longed to see him make some mistake or cause some scandal. That way, their dearest little darlings at home could finally let out a breath of relief after years of suffering. Only then could they most sorrowfully and arrogantly lament, "Hey, told you so. This Shiha Shenjun is just a man, after all." That was why these nobles were enthusiastically plying Moshi with as much wine as possible. At first, the old bastards were just looking for some excitement, but their malice gradually rose to the surface. A drunk person might do or say something that they shouldn't, the old bastards thought. They couldn't get at any of Shihajun's real weaknesses like this, but maybe they could expose a flaw or two. Henry, is he acting like he's above everyone else, or is he just minding his own business? Probably the latter. What was he doing, acting so high and mighty? When these crafty old foxes met each other's eyes, they knew what needed to be done without saying a word. Each of them was enlivened by the opportunity. As if waging a war of attrition, they began taking turns toasting Moshi. Shihajun, another. Ha ha ha, to your meteoric rise, to promotions and prosperity. I've always taught my son to learn from Shihajun's example. Come, come, top up Shihajun's cup. Moshi truly could not take much more. If they were his age or younger, he might be able to turn them away, but all these people were of his father's generation and wore warm and enthusiastic smiles. Neither etiquette nor atmosphere allowed him to refuse. As he downed cup after cup, even the rims of his phoenix eyes were reddening from the fumes. The army ruffians of the Northern Frontier Army continued to mutter among themselves. Another 2 cups and Stepdad's gonna fall over. 2 cups? I think one'll do it. Stepdad looks like he really can't take any more. But Moshi could. He drank another full 6 rounds. By the time the 7th cup was pushing toward him, his face was pale and he was on the verge of retching. My apologies, Uncle Chin. The man's beady eyes shone as he earnestly pressed him. Oh, Shi'ar, I used to be comrades with your dad. We went through hell and high water together. With this cup of wine, I toast your father. You mustn't refuse. Down it in one go. The others joined in, urging Moshi along. Drink, drink, like father, like son. Drink for your father and his old friends. At this point, how could Moshi not know that they were taking turns to get him drunk, that they desired to see him humiliated? But Moshi's stubbornness rivaled iron. It would have been one thing if he couldn't tell what they wanted, but the instant he figured it out, the likelihood that he'd admit defeat dropped to 0. His vision was blurring, filled with those greasy, grinning faces, those predatory eyes. A wave of heat roiled through his chest. His father. How did these people have the audacity to mention his father to him? Back when his father passed away, when his uncle had usurped power in the family, when his mother had remarried, how had all these people treated him? To a one, they had shunned him, eager to wipe him from society like mud from the bottom of their shoe. Yet now the name of their old friend and dear acquaintance dropped freely from their tongue, and they went on about how they had held Moshi when he was little, taught him to hunt and ride. Moshi's heart burned fiercely, the rims of his eyes reddening. A surge of obstinate fury abruptly engulfed him. Drink, drink! Ha ha ha, the Mo clan's alcohol tolerance has always been lousy. Reminds me of the late Fuling Chun. He couldn't handle a drop of wine either. Shi'ar and Fuling are too similar. How dare they mention him? These faces were like kindling in his heart. With a jug of wine, a handful of fire, a splash of bubbling oil, everything burst into flame. Moshi jumped to his feet, eyes fixed on the men in front of him. Cowed by the terrifying sight of Moshi with his eyes scarlet, those elders' faces fell, their smiles frozen. They were still afraid of making Moshi truly lose his temper. Someone raised their voice, feigning calm. Shihajun, you don't need to drink if you don't want to. Your father didn't like to drink either. You too. He was interrupted by a loud bang. Moshi had opened a jug of strong wine nearby with one hand, his gaze deathly fixed upon the speaker's face. He brutally lifted the jug, tendons white, as he pushed it into the other man's arms. Then he opened a second jug for himself. That old noble's jowls trembled as he forced his mouth into a fearful smile. What does Shihajun mean by this? I'm toasting Uncle Chin on behalf of my late father. Moshi bit out each word. He reached over with his other hand to firmly pat the old noble's wizened face. I'll drain it, he said softly. Uncle Chin had better not leave a single drop either. Whoever backs down is a rotten loser. With that, he lifted the wine, closed his eyes, and tilted his head back to drink the entire jug. By this point, the eyes on Shihajun were no longer limited to the crowd surrounding him. Nearly everyone in the hall had been drawn in by his grand gesture. Stupefied, they craned their necks to watch this drinking contest. Uncle Chin saw that Moshi had finished his jug. He looked down at the jug bigger than his own face and couldn't avoid swallowing nervously. A chill ran down his back. However, everyone was watching. He couldn't afford to take this lying down. He steeled himself and leaned back to chug. Unfortunately, he couldn't hope to match Moshi's resilience. After he gulped down half the jug, he couldn't take any more. He doubled over and threw up. With a crash, the wine jug shattered on the ground. Uncle Chin raised his head with effort, meeting Moshi's scornful and vicious gaze. Those phoenix eyes were scarlet from the wine, but remained clear through sheer force of will. They were like twin daggers. Moshi's glossy lips parted. "Uncle, are you going to keep drinking?" Uncle Chin shuddered. No, no. Although he had admitted defeat, there were still others who thought Moshi would break under a little more pressure. Unwilling to give up now, they took up the challenge. In no time, another jug of wine was brought forward. Just as Moshi was about to take it, someone grabbed hold of his arm. Through his bleary, reddened eyes, Moshi turned to look. Gumong had gotten to his feet, his face clear and resolute. It was hard to tell if this was the Gu Shishong of the past, or the broken prisoner of the present. Gumong took the wine jug from him. "Why are so many of you ganging up on him?" Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Oh! Okay. The next chapter title, is You're Not Worthy, which, what? Aren't there, like, 2 different Danmei where that phrase comes up? Or at least, like, the Danmei adaptations? That's a thing in Word of Honor, but I feel like it was a thing in the Untamed too. I don't know. Anyway, that just every Danmei has to have a "you're not worthy" moment, I guess. His head hurt, fit to burst, but Moshi still gritted his teeth and pushed Gumong away. "None of your business," he said quietly. "You'd better sit down." Gumong didn't listen. "Why are you bringing up his papa during a celebration?" Moshi wondered if he was imagining it. He saw an anger he'd never before witnessed in those usually vacant blue eyes. Gumong's hand gripped Moshi's wrist tightly, perhaps out of guilt or in atonement. He wouldn't let go, no matter what. "Don't you know his papa passed away a long time ago?" He paused. "Why? Why do you want to make him sad?" The old bastards couldn't take this hit to their pride. "You disgusting creature," one of them spat. "You dare speak to us nobles like this in the palace? Running wild just because your mind's broken? Get lost. No one asked you." Gumong didn't budge. He stared at them, and then yanked his lapels open to expose the slave collar around his pale neck. Despite this mark of shame upon him, he nevertheless stood valiantly in front of Moshi. The sight of him left the crowd momentarily stunned. It was as though the former beast of the altar, that powerful and charismatic man who could charm humans and ghosts alike, had returned to this broken shell. Oh, Blue, thank you. I was thinking of, "You're not qualified to talk to me." That's right. That's what Lao Ji says. And yeah, it's in the adaptation at least. I don't know if it's in the original. I cannot recall right now. I never finished reading MDZS, even though, like, I wanted to, but anyway, that's another story. Where... "I am a servant of Shiha Manor," Gumong proclaimed. "He is my master." Moshi was so dizzy he was close to collapsing. Only sheer willpower kept him on his feet. He closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Gumong, you'd better get..." I'll drink this wine on his I'll drink this wine on his behalf," Gumong said, interrupting him. As he spoke, he imitated what Moshi had done to open the seal, his expression grave. But before he could drink a single drop, a mighty kick to the chest cut him off. "Haven't you been taught the rules?" cried the furious old noble. The jug of wine smashed to pieces on the ground. That old noble's son had died fighting Gumang. He pointed a trembling finger at him, face scarlet. You traitor, you deserve to die 1,000 times for your crimes. What right do you have to stand here and talk?" The situation had spun out of control, and no one knew what to say to resolve it. On the other hand, the emperor was a madman who thrived on chaos. He probably thought that an ordinary feast on New Year's Eve wasn't thrilling enough, and the sight of a fight breaking out under his nose only served to energize him. Engrossed, he watched with his chin in his hand instead of calling for them to stop at once. At his core, Gumang had a ruthless nature. While he remained naive, he could still be passive. But now he had regained some of his memories and learned something of the debts he owed Moshi. Fueled by this knowledge and his natural instincts, Gumang refused to back down, no matter how inappropriate his actions might be. Gumang pointed at Moshi. "I've done bad things, but he hasn't." No one spoke. To gang up on him like that is shameless. Moshi was getting dizzier. Quietly, he tried to stop him. "Gumang, don't..." Gumang glanced at Moshi with his clear, bright blue eyes. "I'm sorry. I understand why you said I was dirty before. You're a good person. I won't let them bully you." With that, he turned to glare at those old bastards. "Come at me, you." He paused, trying to come up with an appropriate term and failing. He tossed one out at random. "You flower pluckers." Silence reigned. The emperor went, "Pfft." The atmosphere had been tense and hostile, but when the crowd heard that ridiculous phrase from Gumang's mouth, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Yue Chunqing nearly spat out his wine as he guffawed, slapping the table. But those old men couldn't handle the affront. They raised their fists, surging forward to seize Gumang. All of them were truly crazed with anger. The wine and their emotions had gone to their heads, and they struck without thought. Moshi blinked laboriously and shook his head. His thoughts were a tangle, leaving only instinct, a thread of lucidity. At the sight of the crowd laying hands on Gumang, Moshi thought of the red lotus sigil on Gumang's neck and was suffused by an intense dissatisfaction and pain. Why? Why did every person he held in his heart end up ruined and destroyed? His father died. Mengzi was sick. Gumang would never recover. Was he fated to be alone? "Don't hit him." Blood vessels spider-webbed across Moshi's eyes as muddled sounds issued from his throat, too soft for anyone to hear. It was too like the thought of the lifelong companionship he'd once begged for, completely unobtainable. His true heart was something no one would ever know or believe in. Don't hit him. It was almost a sob. Moshi shielded Gumang, who was clutching his head, wretchedly trying to squirm away from the onslaught. Both his hands and his voice were trembling. The world in his eyes was waterlogged and shaky. Moshi was drunk enough that he was no longer fully alert, and it was hard for others to tell what he intended. Although he was trying to protect Gumang, no one had noticed anything strange about his actions. The onlookers only knew that a fight had broken out and Shihajun had gotten pulled in. Many faces paled at once. But when they looked to the emperor, they saw that he still hadn't called for a stop to the fighting. He was rolling a berry between his fingers and watching with narrowed eyes as if in contemplation. The first group to spring to action was the officers of the Northern Frontier Army. Despite their jokes, their stepdad was still their dad. They had faced death together. How could they allow others to humiliate him so? They forgot about placing bets and hastened to the scene. "Aya, Yongle-jun, cool down a little. Xingha-jun, don't be mad, it's the new year." They smiled as they broke up the scuffle, sneaking in a few punches alongside. How could the old nobles be a match for these army ruffians? In moments, the officers had most of them thoroughly subdued, but a few of those who remained held blood grudges against Gumang. They had lost all rationality and cared nothing for the rank or the circumstances. As they grabbed Gumong and struck him, they shrieked in rage. "You deserve to die. Why don't you go die?" Princess Mengzi couldn't bear to watch any longer either. She was worried that Moshi would be hurt in the chaos. Ignoring Yan Ping's attempts to dissuade her, she also strode over to intervene. But how... This doesn't sound like a good idea. Ignoring Yan Ping's attempts to dissuade her, she also strode over to intervene. But how would those old men be willing to listen? The pain of mourning their sons, the blood debts carved into their bones. They might suppress these things when they were sober. But now, these men had been unexpectedly set off. The princess was here? So what? You better fucking listen up. No one cares what happened to your mind. It doesn't matter if you've forgotten. You're still a murderer, a traitor. You're going to hell, never to be reincarnated. All the dead are watching. All of them are watching you. Gumong's heart juddered. All the dead were watching him, just like that time at the soul-calling abyss. All of them were watching him, demanding their lives from him. Why haven't you died yet? All I wish for, day in and day out, is to see you dead. You motherless, fatherless bastard cur. These men had lost control. Stripped of their rank, wealth, and reputation, a human's basest instincts and emotions were no different from those of a wild beast. Someone shoved Gumong viciously. He stumbled and fell to the ground, knocking over the tea table behind him. Wine spilled across the floor, and shards of porcelain pierced the flesh of his back. Blood flowed from the wounds, but Gumong barely noticed the pain. Faced with the intense hatred of those old nobles, he couldn't say a word. He watched as someone picked up a heavy jug of wine, preparing to smash it over his head. Without warning, something came flying through the air and shattered the jug. The broken pieces skittered across the floor as wine splashed everywhere. Gumong shielded his face with a hand, squinting through the downpour of wine. When he could again open his eyes, he saw that a pipe had tumbled to the floor next to him. So this was the object that had been thrown with enough force to break the wine jug. Staring, Gumong turned his head. The person who had blocked this blow was Murong Lian. Murong Lian had risen from his seat. His hand was presently clamped around that insane old noble's wrist, and he was quite drunk. He reached out to flick the man's head, smiling lazily. "What's wrong, little darling? Using the chaos as a cover for your own vengeance? Who do you think you are? This lord's grudge hasn't even been settled yet. Get the fuck to the back of the line." "Murong Lian, you dare to address this elder so? You. Oh, you're unhappy with being called little darling?" Murong Lian licked his lips and smiled. "What a pouty flirt you are. All right, how about little sweetheart? You." Now that Shihe, Wangshu, and Mengzi were all involved, the emperor had no choice but to step in, no matter how much he wanted to watch the show. He finally cleared his throat from atop the throne, as if he had only just noticed the commotion. "What's all this?" he asked sternly. "It's New Year's Eve. I don't care if you're not bringing us blessings, but you dare make a scene and cause trouble here? Imperial guards." "Yes, your majesty. Pull them apart. At once." Gumong finally managed to escape from the mess. The imperial guards pulled the old nobles off him and dragged him out of the fray. Panting for breath, he instinctively looked toward Moshi, only to see that Mengzi had already helped him over to a seat nearby. Moshi had been wounded. Someone had cut him deeply on the shoulder, and the wound still dripped blood. Now that the fight was over, he could finally let down his guard. As soon as he lowered his defenses, he looked entirely exhausted by the effects of the wine. "Lean back," said Mengzi. "Let me take a look at your wound." Moshi's eyes drifted shut as he rested against the stone pillar at his back. Distressed, Mengzi ran soft fingers over his shoulder as she murmured, "Why didn't you dodge?" I'm fine. Moshi's long lashes lowered. Couldn't. You couldn't? Mengzi wasn't stupid. More like you got distracted as soon as you saw him take the wine for you. He's a traitor. Why can't you get this straight? Why can't you remember this? Moshi's lashes fluttered. I didn't do it for him, he murmured. Mengzi didn't reply. She knew how he was. When he dug his heels in, not even 10 oxen could move him. Instead, she merely placed a palm over his wound. I'll help you stop the bleeding. Gumong witnessed this all from where he sat nearby. Throughout their exchange, Mengzi hadn't looked at anyone else, and neither had Moshi. Gumong began to understand why Moshi was so good to her. Everyone longed for gentleness and was grateful for tenderness. He inflicted upon Moshi wounds and suffering, while Mengzi gave him care and protection. He had initially thought to atone for his crimes. He had wanted to say sorry to Moshi for the things he couldn't remember, but now there was a lump in his throat and he couldn't say a thing. He was a traitor. That meant he had no one, and only ever brought harm to others, right? Gumong didn't look at Moshi and Mengzi again. He turned away and reached down to pull a deeply embedded shard of crockery from his arm. He tossed it to the ground. Just moments ago, he had yanked open his collar and said he belonged to Moshi, so he could help Moshi and take the wine for him. What a massive joke. Even the thought of it made his face burn with embarrassment. Slowly, almost wretchedly, he crouched down in a corner. There he sat with his arms around his knees, curling himself into a ball as if to escape from those curious and disdainful stares. But he couldn't hide. Like a fool, he had impulsively stepped out in front of Moshi and loudly proclaimed his stance. Everyone had heard him. Now he had made trouble for Moshi. He didn't dare go to Moshi's side, nor did Moshi want him there. No one had forgiven him, and no one paid attention to him. He could only brace himself and sit alone, head lowered, as he endured those sharply assessing gazes. He even said Shihajun was his master. Hee, wasn't he always that arrogant? Sure, he used to be formidable, but this is why he was doomed to fail. He has no self-awareness or brains. He had humble lineage, yet great ambitions. Everything about him was wrong. He only became a general because his innate spiritual power happened to be strong. Nothing more. Now that his core is shattered, it's obvious how preposterous he is. He certainly doesn't know his place. What a nuisance. He even got Shihajun injured, too. What a disaster. Sitting among these snippets of conversation that only grew louder, Gumong lost the powerful shadow he had briefly regained. Once again, he was hunched and small. Okay, that's... Oh, art. Wait, the art? Oh, I forgot about the art. Oh, sorry. I'm going to show y'all now. Yeah, that's our art. I'm so sorry. I got so wrapped up in what was happening. It's, Murong Lian breaking up the fight, because that distracted me a lot. I was like, what, now why would he do that? I didn't show you guys Murong Lian being an absolute diva. Exactly. Henry, I know. Anyway, I just realized that the chapter title changed meanings from saying you're not worthy of, like, to the nobles, about Moshi, to Gumong feeling like he himself is not worthy. Rena, I think the Emperor... Well, he just wants to watch the show. He just wants chaos. But also, I think he, like, knows about Moshi and Gumong's past. And he's almost, like, trying to create situations to, like, give him more information about them. Because I got that vibe that he was, like, specifically observing them. Like, what is going on here? So I think he's, like, smarter than he's letting on. there's like chaos and then there's like something else going on in there. Well, we are at chapter 66, which is the last chapter, and it is called Paying Respects. That night, it was Mengzi who brought Moshi back to his manor. This task didn't befit her rank, but just like her elder brother the Emperor, Mengzi didn't care for what other people thought. Gumong lifted the curtain for her, wanting to help Moshi into the carriage, but Mengzi only looked at him. I can handle this on my own. Gumong hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to take the wine on his behalf. Mengzi wasn't cruel to him, but neither was she kind. She gazed at him impassively and said nothing. In contrast, Yuanyang scoffed from beside her. Take the wine on his behalf, she snapped. Do you have the right? Are you worthy of that? Gumong paused. It's just that I learned about some things. I want to make up for them. Make up for them? Yuanyang shrilled. You caused so much trouble and hurt him all those times, and now you figure out that you should make up for them. But what use do we have for your swine heart? What could you possibly make up for? After a pause, Yuanyang continued like a dog gnawing on a bone. You're nothing more than an accursed liar. You... Enough. Mengzi raised a hand to stop Yuanyang and turned toward Gumong. Under the pristine moonlight, her expression was very cold, and though she didn't outwardly deride him, her gaze was icy. General Gu, I know that you had good intentions, but I ask you to please stop making trouble for Mo Daga. You've already hurt him so deeply, she said. Let him be. She didn't call him names. Mengzi would never say such things, but Gumong understood her meaning. He looked at the wound on Moshi's shoulder and fell silent for a moment. Then, without a word, he turned and stepped aside. Mengzi and Moshi entered the compartment, and he followed in their wake. When they arrived at the residence, Li Wei, who had already heard about the commotion, was waiting solemnly at the door with a crowd of servants. As soon as he caught sight of Mengzi, he hurried to kowtow. Your subordinate Li Wei greets Princess Mengzi. To your longevity and prosperity. Although Mengzi wasn't the mistress of Shihe Manor, nearly everyone treated her that way. They respectfully and warmly led her into the house. Shihe Manor's seats were all arranged in pairs. Li Wei was more than ready to kiss up to their guest. He got Moshi settled in a side room, then came out to flatter Mengzi. Princess, our lord truly thinks of you day and night. See how he saves you a special place in everything, all so it's convenient when you visit. Mengzi sighed. He's just lazy. He only does this for the sake of symmetry. He's not saving anything for me. How could that be? Even we servants can see the feelings my lord holds for the princess. As he spoke, Li Wei pulled out one of the yellow rosewood chairs. Princess, please take a seat and enjoy some tea before you go. Mengzi didn't demur, so Yuanyang smiled. Then we'll be imposing on housekeeper Li. It's no trouble at all. Li Wei hastily waved at the other servants to prepare some snacks and honeyed fruits, and to bring out a pot of the finest Bi Luo Chun tea for Mengzi. He chuckled as he fawned over her. Princess, look, this tea set only has 2 cups. It's the Lord's favorite. In the future, you must come often to have some tea with him or play a game of chess. Mengzi glanced at the teaware. It was indeed a set from Chonghua's imperial kilns with only 1 teapot and 2 cups. The sort of tea set usually used to receive very close friends, or used between married couples. The imperial kilns manufactured them to please such buyers, the implication being that the affection between the tea drinkers ran so deep as to leave no room for others. Mengzi turned her snow-white face aside and coughed lightly. Housekeeper Li, don't be absurd. I've never liked porcelain with pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms. There's a footnote, known as the 3 Friends of Winter. These plants remain tenacious even during the coldest days, and symbolize noble character and steadfast friendship. If you continue to presume your lord's intentions, I just might tell him when he wakes. See if he punishes you. Ayo, then I dare not presume, said Li Wei. Despite his words, the smile in his eyes didn't fade in the least. A woman's feelings were easy to guess. Although Mengzi made a show of rebuking him, she still liked to hear that Moshi was thinking of her, looking after her, and treating her differently from others. As Li Wei served the princess tea and sweets and made conversation, he saw, out of the corner of his eye, there was someone standing in a dim corner, watching silently. Li Wei's heart skipped a beat. It was usually Gumong who sat where Mengzi was sitting and used the teacup Mengzi was using. But that was merely because Gumong didn't understand etiquette, and the lord didn't care to manage him, that he was allowed to behave in such an unruly manner. Would Gumong see this as Mengzi encroaching on his territory and become hostile toward her? Li Wei's heart pounded. He was about to find some excuse to send Gumong away when he saw Gumong look at Mengzi. His expression wasn't hateful. Rather, it was bleak. He was like a fuzzy little wolf pup who had only now realized his rank and fate within the pack. He stood still for a moment, then turned to leave. Many things were fine as long as he didn't know about them. But now that he did, he understood in hindsight why other people had reacted to him the way they did. Gumong finally understood why Moshi had been so upset when Gumong had first sat in that chair, why he had said, "This seat wasn't saved for you." Oh, but I don't think that's what he meant. Wolves had their own hierarchies within the pack, and people were no different. He had thought that the seat beside Moshi was empty, so he'd had no qualms about claiming it. But it turned out that seat had an owner. Though she hadn't come back for it yet, Moshi had always been saving it for her. It was he who had dared to shamelessly encroach on Mengzi's place. His cheeks scorched with heat. Gumong's been a lot more obedient recently. It was a few days after New Year's Eve. Li Wei stroked his chin as he stood beneath the colonnade, watching Gumong hard at work. He doesn't make trouble or backtalk, and he doesn't carelessly sit in certain places anymore. He clicked his tongue and grinned as he reached his conclusion. Medicine Master Zhang's cure is so effective. Moshi had repeatedly asked Gumong what Zhang Yeshui had said to him that night, or if he had remembered anything else, but Gumong was reticent. This matter remained a mystery until the first day of spring, when Moshi changed into a set of undyed white robes and announced that he was visiting Warrior Soul Mountain to offer incense to his father. When he heard this, Gumong's eyes flashed with sadness. Moshi frowned. "What's wrong?" Gumong had been making a great effort these past few months, and his speech was much more coherent than before. Aside from some mispronounced words or difficulties in moments when he was overwhelmed by emotion, he didn't sound much different from ordinary people. "I want to go with you," he said. "Can I?" "What for?" Gumong lowered his gaze and softly replied, "I want to pay my respects, too." Moshi's slender fingers stilled in the middle of straightening his collar. He looked up and stared at Gumong, as if pondering something. After a long interval, he said, "Change into white clothes. I'll wait for you in the front hall." In the spring, Warrior Soul Mountain was lushly verdant and draped in fragrant blossoms. The ruthless cold of winter had passed, and the newly liberated streams babbled along. The warm April sun shone on the river's surface, which sparkled like crystal. Startled animals fled into the brush now and then with a rustle. The two of them ascended the mountain in silence, walking single file. To show one's sincerity in paying respects, riding swords or using qinggong to scale the mountain was forbidden. Visitors had to walk up step by step. Following the path from the bottom of the mountain, it would take most of a shuchen to reach the summit. Henry, I think you're absolutely right. The seat definitely was saved for Gumong. Yeah, and blue. Gumong literally said, I will give you a home. So, two imperial guards stood at attention outside the heroes' tombs. When they saw Moshi, they lowered their heads and performed their bows, the red tassels on their helmets rustling. Greetings to Shihajun. Moshi nodded to them and led Gumong into the cemetery. It was surrounded by pine and cypress trees and uncommonly still and silent, as if the cemetery itself didn't wish to disturb the eternal rest of the heroes' souls. Even the twitter of birdsong seemed somehow soft. As the two walked up the tall, white jade stairs, Gumong looked around at the jade gravestones inscribed in gold as far as the eye could see. Su Huaijun, Zhou Jingyue. May his valiant soul rest in eternal peace. Han Shanjun, Yue Fengya. May his valiant soul rest in eternal peace. On and on it went. The higher they ascended, the more gravestones there were, filled with inscriptions of their occupants' life achievements. When Gumong's steps took him past a large jade gravestone, he stopped involuntarily. Fresh fruits and steamed buns were arranged before that plaque, and the ashes from the paper money that had been burned in the grave's basin were not yet scattered by the wind. In the sacrificial censer, 3 sticks of fragrant incense burned even now. He couldn't help peering at the name carved on the plaque. A graceful row of words was inscribed in a powerful hand. Wang Shujun the 7th, Murong Xuan. May his valiant soul rest in eternal peace. The gold shone magnificently in the sunlight. Moshi noticed Gumong had paused. He turned and glanced at him. That's Murong Lian's father's tomb, he said. His gaze swept over the tribute of food and the censer, and he sighed. Looks like Murong Lian left not too long ago. This was fortunate. If Murong Lian saw Gumong here, they were nigh guaranteed another round of verbal sparring. It would not be appropriate to fight in front of so many heroes from bygone generations. Gumong studied Murong Xuan's tomb for a while longer and turned back to ask Moshi, Where's your papa's tomb? At the very top. Let's go. The pair climbed to the mountain's summit. When they looked up, they could see the mist encircling the peak and the vast expanse of the heavens and the earth. Chonghua's imperial capital was faintly visible in the sea of clouds below, so distant it seemed like a dream from a lifetime ago. As they gazed down, they saw that the mountain path they had taken meandered like a river, linking the mortal world below to the city of the dead above. Here on the peak of Warrior Soul Mountain, death was far more real than life. Moshi strode over to a gravestone as tall as 3 men and placed the sacrificial basket in his hand at its side. Father, I've come to see you. The mountain wind blew through his white robes. The peak seemed so close to the 9 heavens that the rising sun scattered its rays right over their heads. The golden words on the jade gravestone gleamed, and Moshi's long lashes rustled and trembled as they met that dazzling light to take in every inch of the inscription. Fu Lingjun, Mo Qing Qi. May his valiant soul rest in eternal peace. Moshi knelt to light the incense and arrange the sacrificial food. The gilt paper money was set alight. The blue-green wisps of smoke carried with them the fresh scent of pine and cypress boughs. Gumong knelt beside him as well. He reached out a hand, hesitant, and looked at Moshi with a question in his eyes. Moshi paused but didn't stop him, so Gumong also gathered up some paper money and cast it into the brazier. The flames flared to life and waves of heat rose. Gumong squinted, coughing softly. Moshi prodded at the paper money with a set of fire tongs, ensuring that each sheet caught and curled into ash, one after another. His feelings were hard to put into words. Many years ago, he had hoped to bring Gumong with him to pay their respects together before his father's grave. He had wanted the only elder he held in high regard to see the only person to whom he had given his heart. But back then, Gumong had refused. He would invariably smile and dodge the topic. Better not to. I mean, considering our relationship, Uncle Mo definitely wouldn't be happy if we paid respects to him. He'd rain curses on you from above for messing around. Or he would flippantly say, Shidi, be good. Shiga can accompany you in other things, but this is really out of the question. It's too formal. Your future wife will be jealous. How would I dare to make the maiden upset? Gumong knew he oughtn't to trouble a maiden's heart, so he thoroughly stomped on Moshi's sincerity. But the present Gumong had obediently followed him here without anyone compelling him to do so, and even properly burned the paper money with him. It was as if his old wish had at last come true. Yet Moshi didn't feel the slightest bit happy. After all the paper ingots were burned, Moshi sighed, let's go. But Gumong didn't budge. He tilted his head to look at Moshi, then said without preamble, I'm sorry. Moshi was about to rise, but upon hearing this, he stilled once more, his gaze fixed on the gravestone. After a spell, he asked, on New Year's Eve, did Zhang Yeshue tell you about my father? You guessed that was it? After seeing the way you've behaved in these past few months, I figured that must be the case. Gumong repeated himself, I'm very sorry. Moshi looked at him. Great. How wonderful. He had once wanted to pay his respects to his father with this person, and now he was finally here. He had once wanted to hear this exact apology, and now he'd finally received it. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. The person here to pay respects should have been his beloved, not a traitorous prisoner and slave. The apology should have come from someone who understood the consequences of his actions, not someone so ignorant and clueless. I really can't remember why I betrayed you back then, Gumong said earnestly, but I won't in the future. Moshi swallowed thickly and closed his eyes for a beat. Gumong, what future do you think you and I could have? Gumong didn't know what to say. He could only mumble, don't be upset. Why would you think I'm upset? Moshi retorted. The days when I'd feel upset because of you have long since passed. As for your betrayal, you did it because you had your own ambition and your own vengeance to exact. You were a genius on the battlefield, a lunatic whose name made the enemy cower in terror. Your lifelong dream was to charge headlong onto the battleground and achieve greatness with your army. Your eyes lit up at the prospect of battle. You didn't like to shed blood, but war excited you, because that was the only way for you to reverse your destiny. Moshi paused and turned back to look at him. But I'm not the same. Gumong made no reply. I hate the battlefield, Moshi continued. Over and over, it takes away the things I care for most, and gives me honors I care nothing for in exchange. Gumong, the two of us were once comrades on the field, but perhaps we were never comrades at heart. He turned his gaze to the clouds that clung to the mountaintop. Perhaps our paths were destined to diverge from the start. That's the end. Let me say that last sentence again, because that is the end of the book. He turned his gaze to the clouds that clung to the mountaintop. Perhaps our paths were destined to diverge from the start. That's a rude ending. Oh, and Blue, thank you. I'm gonna look at that illustration. Okay. I'm gonna show y'all if I can, if it will be bendy enough. There we go. Okay, Gumong's eating an apple in the tree, and there's his dog, and there's Moshi. Blue, they shouldn't have added that chapter 2 in the novel. Yeah, maybe that would have been a good place to start the next... Well, I don't know. Yeah, it could have been a place to start the next one, but I don't know. I don't know how they make those decisions. All I noticed is that the novels in this series just keep getting shorter every time, but I think that's just a 7 Seas thing. I don't know if I should do this or not. I already have book 3, And I'm like, do we all want to look at the cover art on book 3 right now before we start that next week? Or should I just ignore it? Okay. Show it. Okay. Book 3. Because book 3 is crazy. I don't know what's happening, but it doesn't look good. It seems like a problem. So, yeah. Yeah. That's a fun one. But, why is he bleeding? It looks like his like eyes are bleeding. Like he is crying blood. Yeah. So that's fun. I don't know how symbolic or how literal that is. I guess we're gonna find out. But yeah. Yeah. That was, oh, a super fun place to end the novel. But, thank you for reading it with me, y'all. And, I guess, yeah, next week, we're gonna get into the super fun, super chill looking volume. This series is so different from Arha. Yeah, it's like, there are like these similarities between the characters that I cannot ignore. But like, the tone is really different. It's like certain Arha things and then a completely like different vibe. But I'm enjoying that. Yeah. I feel like I already can't wait to read Meat Bun's other series, Case File Compendium, which, like, I'm gonna wait for a while to start that, because I possibly maybe want to do reading streams for that, so I think I want to finish Remnants of Filth first, so that's going to be a while, but I do look forward to that series, even though that one is probably going to be a lot more intense than this one. More edgy? I don't know. Oh, Ballad of Sword and Wine. I do also want to read that. See, it's hard to make decisions because I think if I were to, like, start a series and stop in the middle of it, go to something else, and then switch back, I would probably, like, lose my place and forget everything. But at the same time, it is kind of hard to do that and then, like, be able to start reading all the different things that I want to read on here. So I don't know. I could be swayed either way. Yeah, Ballad of Sword and Wine looks really interesting to me. Okay. Let's do Ballad of Sword and Wine next. Okay, I'm down for that. Yeah. That'll be fun, like a new author for me. Yeah, awesome. So, thank you for coming. I'm gonna, like, totally, I think I am gonna totally finish Yuwu, and then we'll do that. But, I had a lot of fun, despite all of the sad and terrible things that have happened. I'll see you next week for book 3. So, have a good one, y'all. Have a good weekend, both of those things. Bye.